How do you manifest on a deadline? Today, I have a viewer question about this really great law of attraction topic on manifesting when you have a tight deadline. And so in just a moment, I'm going to go through my response. And if you find that you have some questions that you would like me to answer on a future YouTube video, I do have a link below where you can submit your questions to me as well. So let's go ahead and jump on into this viewer question on manifesting on a deadline. All right, here's the question. Hi, Andrea. My name is Tiffany, and my question has to do about manifesting things when there is a real life deadline. For most of the things I want to improve in my life, I am able to follow my bliss and deal with occasional resistance just fine. I can feel the positive change in myself and in my circumstances. As soon as I desire something that has a real life deadline, though, the resistance and lack mentality that shows up can be intense. Quite often, this has to do with money. I will have a bill come due or a trip I want to take which has a time or date by which I need to come up with the money. There have been too many times that I haven't had the money when I needed it and I've missed out or had to pay the late fees. I just want to know if there are any tips you may have for manifesting when there is a time crunch. This definitely is the hardest part for me right now. I have a lot of trouble staying positive or in the receptive mode when I come up against so much doubt. I would be incredibly grateful if you had any tips. Thank you so much for all that you do. You have been a big help in my journey. Well, thank you, Tiffany, for writing in with this great question. And something I'm sure a lot of people want to understand is, how do you manifest on a deadline? So I'm going to jump in with my top tips. I would say, if you're watching this video, if you've had any successes with manifesting on a deadline, make sure to go ahead and drop your suggestions as well in the comments so that our viewer, Tiffany, gets as many great responses as possible. And also, every viewer can get lots of great feedback on how to do this as well. So drop your suggestions in the comments. But let's go ahead and jump in with my advice. All right, so manifesting on a deadline is one of those tricky situations, okay? It's a tricky situation. And what we're ultimately wanting to do is we're wanting to find a way to step back from reality a little bit and alchemize the situation, okay? And I'll kind of get into that as we're talking. So when there's a deadline, let's say that, you want to take a trip and you want to purchase tickets, and there's a specific time that money needs to be sent. Okay. I get that reality is presenting with you that this is the way it has to be. Okay. You have to submit this money by this deadline. And the first thing I want to mention about this is that when there's a deadline, okay, it really is a limitation. It's a limitation. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't manifest by the deadline. We certainly can. We can manifest instantly. Okay. So you can get anything that you want right away if you need it. Okay. But when we've created in our world this idea that something has to be done at a specific time, we want to try to let go of that a little bit, because very frequently what happens is we hold on to it tight. I got to get it done by November 2nd. I got to get it in by 8 p.m. And we hold tight to that limitation that this is the only way it can happen. Now, if you're doing that, guess what? Everyone's doing that, okay? So this is not a value judgment on you for doing that. I think we all fall victim to this from time to time, where there seems to be something that has to be done at a specific time, and we get worried about it. Okay. We get worried about making sure that the payment's made, making sure that we sign up on time, making sure that we get to the appointment on time. We get very hung up on that kind of stuff. But what we always want to come back and remember is that we are the ones creating our reality. And it can be a very fluid reality, a very free reality, where things kind of come in and go and you line up at the right time. Or it can be a very restrictive reality, okay, where, it seems like there's doors slamming shut. You got to get somewhere at a specific time. You're rushing around to get places when you need to be there and pay things when they need to be paid. Okay. And so reality can be constructed in either of those ways. And whenever we see that something like this is coming up where we're missing deadlines and deadlines are a problem and there's appointments and one of the most important things to understand is that that's not an isolated issue. Okay. It's not like if I could just figure out how to get the money to pay the bill, then that problem is solved, because this is a recurring issue. Right? So this is a recurring thing that's going on, is deadlines. And so we could get the money manifested to get it by the deadline. Okay. Or we can solve the root problem. And the root problem is that we're creating deadlines all over the place where they don't actually need to be. Okay. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, about getting more of a bird's eye view of what's going on and correcting that vibration so that we don't really have this deadline issue consistently popping up. So if you're having an experience where there are lots of deadlines that are being missed, there is some anxiety and there is some stress about meeting things on time, getting to the appointment on time, getting the payment made on time. There is this sense of, I'm going to miss out if I don't get this when I can get it. All right. What we want to look at on a broader perspective is that there are infinite number of ways that things can come. There's an infinite number of ways that things can work out. Okay. So we want to get away from the idea that, let's say again, that perhaps there's a cruise that you want to go on. Okay. There's a cruise. And let's say that right now it says that in order to get on that cruise, I need to give them deposit by February 2nd. Okay. That's their deadline for that cruise. February 2nd is the deadline. Now, true, that's their deadline for that cruise. But one way that we can kind of alchemize this is to step out of that mindset that I have to get this cruise and instead focus on the idea that there are infinite cruises. And if this one doesn't work out for whatever reason, there's another one coming. And if this one doesn't work out for some reason, there's a better one coming. Okay. So that's kind of the primary thing that I would like for anyone who wants to get around this deadline thing to focus on, is that there's an infinite number of ways that you can get your foot in the door for anything. I don't care if it's paying your landlord their rent. I don't care if it's signing up for a trip. I don't care if it's getting to the wedding. It may look on the surface that there's only one specific time slot for you to achieve something, but in reality is fluid. And there are infinite numbers of ways that things can work out. And so when you find yourself kind of clinging to this idea that there's a deadline, you want to take that attitude. Well, yeah, there's a deadline and I'd like to make the deadline by then. I'd like to get that deposit turned in by that time. And that's what we're going to go with. And we're going to manifest that. If I feel myself getting stressed, well, you know what? If this one doesn't work out, there's another one coming. And if this one doesn't work out, it probably means the universe is sending me a better one. Okay. That's something I really like to do when it comes to deadlines, is if I find myself getting stressed out about getting something turned in, getting something paid, getting something signed, showing up, and I'm trying to will the universe to make it happen at that specific time. Well, when I find myself clinging, I know that that means in that moment I'm resistant and I'm focused on the idea that it has to be this way. Okay. And remember, insistence. I love this way of looking at it. Insistence is always resistance. The more we want to make it work, the more resistant that we become. And so what will happen is I'll start pushing it away because I'm clinging to it so much. So whenever I notice that I'm doing that, I'm clinging to a deadline, I'll loosen up my grip a little bit by saying something like, well, I'd like to manifest it this way. If it doesn't work out, I know something better is coming. There's a better one coming. There's a better cruise coming. There's a better appointment coming. There's a reason I shouldn't be going to that. There's a reason something else is lining up. And I'll say that in that moment. Now, this is a fantastic thing to do because what it does is it loosens up your resistance. Okay. So now you're no longer pushing against the deadline. And you're also reinforcing a super powerful thing that I think everybody should be working on and putting out there, which is that there's a better one coming. If this doesn't work out, something better is coming. Because if that's something that you're consistently saying every time you feel insistent, you have plenty of times to reinforce the idea that there's a better one coming, a better one coming, a better one coming, a better one coming. And the times that you do miss the deadline, you'll manifest something better. Okay. You'll get a better cruise, so to speak. Like maybe for that cruise, you were going to get like a basic cabin for that price, but you couldn't get that one. But then the next one that came, you got a deluxe cabin and it was half the price. And oh my gosh, I'm so happy I didn't make that deadline because I stayed open to receiving this one. Okay, so that's the more global thing we want to talk about, is that this is not an isolated case of let me just get on the cruise. This is more of an issue of we want to create a more fluid reality where there are infinite cruises to get on. Okay, so it doesn't really matter if this one here works out. All right, so now the beauty of this strategy is that when we loosen the grip, when we stop being so insistent, for whatever reason, allowing us to think that there's another way it could work, staying open to more possibilities. When we loosen our grip, we stop pushing against the deadline. And the pushing against the deadline is the only reason it isn't working out. Okay. And so this trick, not only will it solve the more global issue of creating these deadlines to begin with, you're going to stay a lot more fluid, but the actual deadline that you want to meet, it's going to allow you to loosen up and not feed so much into the frustration. And when you loosen up, you radically improve the likelihood that that deadline will be met. This has happened to me so many times, I can't even count it anymore, where I found myself wanting something to occur by a certain time, in a certain place, or in a certain way. There's some kind of deadline, okay? And in that moment, I was tensed up, I was pushing against it, and feeding into it not working out. And that causes it not to work out, right? In that moment, reminding myself, well, there's an infinite number of ways this could work. And if this one little tiny speck of a way doesn't work out, well, there's an infinite number of other ways that it could work. And maybe it's going to work out even better. And when I've done that, it's allowed me to relax. And then that thing that I want snaps into focus. Okay. So it's not about willing the deadline to work. It's actually about letting go of the idea of the deadline working at all, convincing yourself it's a very arbitrary deadline and it doesn't matter. And when it doesn't matter, then it works. Now, I want to go through this particularly on the subject of money because our viewer Tiffany did say this often happens with money. So I want to walk this through in terms of money. But first, if you like law of attraction videos that teach you how to create the life of your dreams, please make sure to go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And of course, go ahead and turn on the handy notification bell. I put out content like this every single week, and I know you're going to love it. All right, but let's get into manifesting money on a deadline because I know this stresses people out. There's a bill, okay? This payment needs to be made. I don't want to have to pay the late fee. All right. So how do we work with that particular energy? Because that seems to be the predominant issue in this question. So let's say that a deadline makes itself known to you. Okay, so maybe there's some big expense that comes in the mail with some big, hairy, scary envelope that's all marked up in red and a big date on it that says October 2nd. It's got to get it done by October 2nd, all right? And you're kind of freaking out a little bit, okay? What do you do? All right. Well, first things first is we want to acknowledge that the second we see that bill and we see some kind of fear, okay, fear always means that we're pointed in a negative direction. Okay. So if you ever get some kind of a deadline thrown in your face that immediately elicits a stressed out reaction, the bill or the deadline isn't really the issue. The thing that we want to correct right off the get is how do I feel about it? Okay. So the second you feel that sense of anxiety, if I've got to pay this or I'm worried about this, what I want you to do is I want you to take a nice deep breath. That's the first thing. Nice deep breath. Okay. Now, the second thing that I want you to do is I want you to take that deadline, whatever it is, and I want you to put it somewhere for when it's relevant. Okay. So for me, I like to use my phone for these kinds of things. If there's something that has to be done by a specific deadline, I like to put it in the calendar of my phone, maybe a couple days before, So let's say that it's due on October 2nd. I may put something in there maybe for September 30th in the calendar, okay, that this thing is coming, needs to be done, okay? And after I put this into the calendar, and this is after I've taken a deep breath, I'm just going to say to myself something to the effect of, I would really like to manifest having this taken care of, probably about a week or so before it's actually due. I would like to manifest having this done at least a week or so before it's due. And I'll just say that, and then I put it away, okay? Now, the main thing here at this point is I want to kind of distract myself. I want to put it out there that this is going to get done a week early. Then I'm going to let it go. Now, the nice thing about this way of doing things is that you're going to set your intention that I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to set a little reminder. We're going to go for this, but I'm going to let it go. Okay. So let's say that the big, hairy, scary bill is for $1,000. Okay. And they want it by October 2nd. Well, I'm going to get this done a week early. I'm going to put it in my calendar and I'm going to let it go. Okay, let it go. Now, the key thing here is during this interim of time, you want to be allowing yourself to relax. We don't want to start clinging to the idea of where's the money? When's the money going to get here? How is it going to get here? How is it going to work out? Because the more that we do that, the more we start to cling. You are going to find that money will flow to you much, much quicker if you simply ask for it to come and then let the subject go. And this is in stark opposition to what most people do. Most people in a situation like this, they ask for the money and then they sweat the money. They worry about the money. They overwhelm themselves with the money. Okay. And we don't want to do that. We want to stay out of that because the more we're looking for it, the more insistent we are and the slower it will come. I personally have found that money tends to show up to me and to people that I have coached when they're not paying too much attention to it, when they've kind of let it go and they're off doing something else. Okay. And so if you have a big, hairy, scary deadline coming up, worrying about it, fixating on it, stressing about it actually pushes the money away. Instead, you want to ask for it, but then you want to find a way to get yourself into a more positive vibration and just kind of enjoy life. And if and when you find your mind drifting back to that $1,000, what I want you to do is do what we talked about earlier in the video. I want you to remind yourself that there's an infinite number of ways that this money can come. And it doesn't really matter if I get it by the arbitrary deadline or not, because there's an infinite number of ways that this problem can be solved. All right. So even if we don't make the deadline, so what? I might even tell myself something like, sure, the deadline is October 2nd and they're going to charge me a $25 late fee if I don't make it. But you know what? If the money doesn't come until October 15th, maybe it's going to come and I'm going to get $2,000 if I wait. So who cares about that $25 late fee? Okay. Notice how I'm making up scenarios. I'm making up scenarios and I want you to practice this. When you see a deadline, so what if I miss it? Maybe it'll work out this way. Maybe I'll get more money later. Maybe they'll end up waiving the fee. Maybe this bill was a mistake. And if I paid it on time, then I got to worry about getting the bill back. All right. So start to make up and fabricate some possibilities about why that deadline might not matter, because truthfully, your reality is infinite and it can be created in infinite ways. But when we buy into the idea of the deadline, what we're saying to ourselves is this limitation has to occur. It has to occur. I have to do it this way or else. And when that's so dominant inside of us, we end up creating that exact experience where the deadline's so important and we miss it and we miss the cruise and we pay the late fee. Right? We want to do it differently. Instead, when these things are coming up, when we find ourselves clinging, we want to sit there and hypothesize a bunch of crazy stories about how it might work out. How might it work out even if I miss the deadline or even if I paid the late fee? Wouldn't it be great because, this is going to happen instead. I'm going to get more money later. Maybe they're going to waive something or maybe they're going to call me to negotiate it down. Who knows? Okay. If I paid it on time, it wouldn't have worked out. You want to play that game because again, it gets you to loosen the reins so that the money can just show up. Okay. We don't want to be feeding into the idea that we're willing anything to happen with the law of attraction. This is something a lot of people are getting wrong. I've gotten wrong too. We think that because we create our reality, we should be able to force it into place. But the forcing into place is exactly the vibration that creates it not to come. Now, in conjunction to this advice, I do really recommend some other methods that you can use for fast manifesting. So I do have lots of techniques, but I do have a video that I did recently on 3 very fast, shockingly fast manifesting methods. So if you want some more ammunition to deal with manifesting on a deadline, I do also highly recommend these methods in this video. I'm going to put the link to that video right over here if you'd like to watch it next. But thanks so much for watching today's video on how to manifest on a deadline. Our question that came courtesy of Tiffany. Thank you, Tiffany. But thanks so much for watching today's video. And of course, I look forward to bringing you another one soon. Bye-bye.